Welcome to this episode of the Partovi Effect. My name is Mrs. Maddie Partovi.
And I'm Dr. Ryan Partovi.
And great news on the vaccine front. There is a legitimate investigation going on. Thank you, Ken Paxton, Texas Attorney General. He's investigating whether there are financial incentives to vaccine recommendations. This is in light of, a lot of people getting fired from their pediatric offices and being refused care because of their vaccination status. I mean, we know what that's like, to be fired from our pediatrician's office. Yeah, so there have been no mainstream.
I haven't heard about this. So
Yeah.
this is interesting news to me.
Yeah.
I only know the name Ken Paxton because he was the subject of some corruption scandal a few years ago. And I know that ultimately he was acquitted, but I don't know whether that means he wasn't involved in it or not. I'm not going to get involved in that though. I don't know. Have you looked into that at all?
No.
I think it's interesting that you started with this because I've not heard of it at all.
Well,
but you're saying so Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton
yes,
he's
launching an investigation.
What does he do? He's launching an investigation into what exactly?
Into whether pediatricians get, a financial bump for recommending a vaccine.
Well, we know that.
We know that it happens, but there are no mainstream investigations that have brought it out to light, within like to the world.
Is that true?
It is true.
I mean, my understanding is that basically that there's a certain amount of money that payers pay extra, and I think it's like extra per person if you're over a certain threshold as a percentage of your patient population is vaccinated. And they do that because they've been convinced by their own employees that, hey, this means that these would be lower risk patients and lower risk practice, and therefore we want to reward practices who reduce the risk for us, the insurance company, and therefore we're going to. And whether or not there's any pharmaceutical company involvement in those incentives, I don't know.
That's what's being investigated.
Yeah, well, maybe.
So remember do you remember we interviewed Dr. Joel Warsh, and he was like, no, and even in his book, he said, no, I don't know anything about that, because there are overhead costs, you pay for the vaccines, and there's storage and admin costs and all that. But the brilliant.
I actually do not remember addressing that with him.
I do.
Okay, good. I'm glad one of us does.
So the brilliant thing about him is that he's open. He's open to this being investigated. He's open to being.
You're talking about Ken Paxton now.
No, I'm talking about Dr. Joel.
Doctor.
Yeah, he's willing to be wrong about it. It's a great thing.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm excited about that.
Yeah.
And
I mean, I think it can only be good to get more information out there for people.
Absolutely.
I wonder how they're going to investigate it. I guess my concern is given that, and this is not a substantiated concern, but it's a concern. The first thing that comes up for me when I hear the name Ken Paxton, because I have this association with him as being, corrupt, frankly, and I don't know that he was exonerated, right? So I'm not saying that. And I think the challenge is that he is not someone that has this like unimpeachable character. I've heard basically, and I had a conversation with ChatGPT about him at one point. Basically, and I was like, how much of this, if we're going to look at it from the, and I'm not going to pull up that conversation now, but basically it's like, if we're looking at it from the most charitable to Ken Paxton side, what is the best we can say? And it basically was like, well, he did some things that were sketchy, but they weren't necessarily criminal if we're being really charitable to Ken Paxton. And then if we're being more skeptical about Ken Paxton, then, you know, that's where things were over the line, but because of his political, associations, maybe he was attacked, and that actually, wait, no, that's part of being charitable to Ken Paxton, is the idea that because he was really close with Trump and, he basically was making some moves against the governor at the time, Greg Abbott, that he was being targeted because things that he did are not necessarily more corrupt than what other people have done, which may be true, but that doesn't erase the corruption. So anyway, it's an interesting case. I encourage everybody to go look into it. I'm not saying one way or the other. I guess what I'm saying is I wish that someone who had a more unimpeachable character was doing this investigation, because what I'm going to be left with if they do the investigation and find no evidence of anything, corrupt going on with the insurance companies or with the pharmaceutical companies, I'm going to be left with, like, can we really trust this finding? I don't think so, right? Because of the nature of the person involved is already suspect to some degree. Now, hey, if he finds, hey, yeah, they're corrupt, I'm going to probably be like, great, that's what I thought anyway, right? So it's all about confirmation bias, right? If he confirms my bias, I like the finding. If he says, no, I don't think this is true, I'm going to lean more into, well, maybe he's been bought off by Big Pharma. Do you follow me?
I do, I
Yeah.
do. And he's
And
he's
you're
starting
like, you
with
got your nose in your phone, so I'm
no,
wondering,
he's
were
starting
you
with
looking something
issuing.
up?
Yes, he's starting with issuing over 20 civil investigative demands to some of the largest medical providers, insurance companies, and pharmaceutical manufacturers in the country, including UnitedHealthcare and Pfizer. So that's where it's starting. So we'll see. Stay updated. And I know exactly what you're talking about.
So he is going after investigating both pharmaceutical companies and insurance
Uh-huh.
companies, which is good because you need to look at both of those. You need to look at both angles to see, because if the money is coming to the doctors, it has to be coming through the insurance companies. They can't be getting kickbacks directly from the pharmaceutical companies, because that would be illegal. But the question is that, are they getting kickbacks? Are they getting increased pay from the insurance companies for having a certain threshold of their patients fully vaccinated? And, again, as Dr. Joel said, his practice wouldn't qualify anyway, so he's not aware of that. But, I also don't think his practice is involved in any HMOs. I think that may be my follow-up question that I asked him, right? Because it's really through the HMO mechanism, through managed care, that you're able to get increased reimbursement for things like having high levels of vaccinated patients. If you're more of a cash pay PPO based practice, which I think his practice is, that's not even on your radar, which I think that's actually where I think that conversation went. Now that we're talking about it, I'm remembering more about it. But yeah, well, I hope they find something that convinces the skeptics.
I know.
I'm already convinced. I mean, I'm pretty skeptical, but I think we have enough evidence of all of it that I don't, do we really need more evidence? But apparently we do, because there's people who obviously still.
Mainstream codified evidence would be amazing. It's like,
Sure. Yeah.
would for, couples having a new baby. Here you
Yeah.
go. This might give you pause. You might want to take a look at this.
Yeah.
You might want to jump into the whole world of informed consent.
Well, I think it's telling that the people who have spent the most time studying this question and have spent the most time as part of the world of medicine and insurance and pharmaceuticals and vaccinations, and yet do not profit from that industry, are some of the most skeptical people of these interventions. it's telling that the people who are most supportive of it, who've spent the most time studying it, are the ones who profit from them, who benefit from them financially. So, I mean, that to me, it always comes back to follow the money for me.
Yeah, I mean, between what we know and Aaron Series' work, the lawyer, I mean, it's all there already, and I would love for it to have to
Well, and
be,
RFK Jr.'s worked before him,
yes,
you know? So,
yeah,
and I think the only way that you dismiss all that is you say, well, I trust the evidence that we have more than the evidence that we don't have, the big gaping holes in the evidence, which are suspicious. And we've talked a lot about that in previous
mm,
episodes. But it's like, if you look at the studies that have never been done on, say, for example, comparing children who received no vaccines to children who received the CDC schedule, and then looking to see what their rates of different diseases are, you think, oh, of course we've run that study. Of course. Well, yeah, there has been that study has been run, but then it was retracted because of methodological flaws. And who ran that study? Well, a practice that was similar in practice to Dr. Joel's practice, where they basically give people choice about vaccine and about vaccinating their children. So they did the study and say, well, you're biased because you're not rah pro-vaccine. It's like, well, or does that actually make us less biased? So look, I think that the fact that that study has never been done by a major academic medical center is in and of itself suspicious.
thank you.
And then they did the one study through I think it was the Henry Ford. Should definitely look that up if you don't know it, but I think it was the Henry Ford Foundation, or anyway, they did a study that was then never published because the findings were considered to be, would question the cause people to question vaccination program. It's like, okay, well, maybe we should be questioning it. So I think, to me, it's like, if you look for where the gaps are in the evidence and how freaking suspicious those gaps are, it's pretty compelling, and it's enough to make you question the evidence that we do have, which pretty much uniformly comes from entities that directly or indirectly profit from vaccination as a program. I didn't know we were going to start with vaccination, but you get me on my soapbox. You get what you get, and you don't throw a fit. Did you want to say anything else about that?
No, I'm complete.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, I do know, as we move on to the next subject, what is on your heart.
I just want to say one more thing about Ken Paxton, because I do not want to get to give the wrong impression. I am totally open to hearing Ken Paxton's side of whatever happened. I don't even know the details of it. We'd be more than happy to have him on the show, hear his side of the story. And I'm not making any claims about whether I think he did or didn't do the things that they say he did or didn't do. All I've heard is the claims. I know that he ultimately wasn't convicted. I think they dropped the case. Anyway, I'm not an expert on that, but we'd be more than happy if somebody wants to email us. What's the email address again? Is it the Partovi effect at gmail.com? And say, hey, I represent Attorney General Ken Paxton, and we'd like to, have him come on the show. Hey, come on, Ken, let's chat. And from that matter, the prosecuting attorney, if he wants to come on and give his side of the story, I'm happy to have him come on. We can have that conversation. I'm not taking sides. All right.
So just to say that there is nuance, even though the case was dropped, you still think he's tainted.
Well, I don't know if tainted is the right word. I would just say that it creates an aura of suspicion, which I think is unfortunate, because I want this question of vaccination to be without suspicion. I want it to be open and shut, decided, and I feel like it's going to be really easy for people who don't agree with his conclusion on either side to say, oh, but it's Ken Paxton. He's sus, and I think that that's unfortunate one way or the other. Like, I mean, I would say it's unfortunate. And I don't know how many, and I think it does also beg the question of like, how do you, let's say he is not guilty, right? How do you get beyond or rise above those kinds of accusations? I think my view, this is my opinion, right? You look to see where you can take responsibility and say, look, here's what I did. Here's what I didn't do. Here's why I believe I was not breaking the law. Here's why I believe I was following the law. And, if the court disagrees, fine. But I'm sorry for the degree to which I did things that left people wondering and questioning, is that something that he should have done or shouldn't have done, right? You just come out and be straight about it, and I think that we don't do that enough as a society. And it's not like, and I say that, and I think there's an important nuance I want to insert here, which is I don't believe in apologizing for things that you did that you felt were justified. I'll give you an example. So one of the things I disagreed with that Bernie Sanders did during his second run for president was he had endorsed Cenk Uygur for the Cenk Uygur's founder of Young Turks. He had endorsed Cenk, but then some comments that Cenk had made like 20 years prior that were somewhat misogynistic came out. And it's like, actually, no, these have been out on the internet for 20 years. Obviously, Cenk started as a conservative. He became a progressive, right? These are things which were well known and that some people decided to drag through, drag out of the sludge to basically paint Bernie with the sludge, right? To get Bernie in trouble for supporting Cenk. So what does Bernie do? He withdraws his endorsement, says, I'm not endorsing anybody anymore, right? To me, that was a cowardly thing to do. Instead, the thing to do is say, look, I'm not endorsing what Cenk said 20 years ago. I'm endorsing who the man is now, right? And I think that is how, I'm kind of answering my own question here, right? But it's like, that's how you give space in the system for people to be forgiven and to move past previous actions.
Well, do you think you're painting sledge on Ken Paxton?
No, I'm not. In fact, I'm specifically saying I don't know whether the allegations were true or not, right? I'm just saying I had a conversation with ChatGPT, so maybe ChatGPT was wrong, right? Very possible. It's been wrong before many times. But basically, I was trying to present that in a way that was fair, but also not stepping over things that I had heard and seen in the past. And I honestly don't know, I have friends who think that everything that was said about Ken was totally political. And, that people didn't like the fact that he was a pro-Trump person and that, they wanted to get rid of him. And that it was like an internal Texas politics thing. And I have other people that I know who believe he was, guilty and basically got out of it because of political connections. And I don't know which is correct. I don't, I have, like I said, I haven't investigated it sufficiently to know. I just know that there was a case, it was dropped. Some of the charges were dropped, some of them were dismissed, and I don't know exactly, what the truth is, nor am I going to spend much more time talking about it. Because I do think it's one of those things that we'll probably never know the full story on, but I have a hard time hearing the name and not thinking about that. I didn't want to step over it because then it would have been weird for everybody who has those same thoughts.
Well,
Make sense?
it does make sense. Yeah.
Did you have anything else you want to say about that?
Um, may God be with him and let him push and push and push until he, you know, get something out of those insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies.
Yeah. No, I mean, absolutely. We're all about the truth here. So whatever the truth is, I hope it comes to light. And I know God is on the side of truth too.
Mhm.
Um, all right. Well, I definitely wanted to talk a little bit about Iran. Are you ready for that?
Totally ready.
Okay, great. Well, as those of you who've been following the news may know, the Iranian people now for the last, oh, um, it's been over 3 weeks now, almost 4 weeks, have been in a fight for their freedom from a tyrannical, murderous criminal regime, the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is really, for people who don't know the history, was really the um, rise of the Islamic Republic in 1979 was a paramilitary coup that was really, I think, tacitly and also actively on behalf of like the French and to some degree the British, and I think to a lesser but still not insignificant degree the Carter administration here in the United States. Um, it was a coup that was enabled, I guess I would say, in a if I'm being charitable. If I'm being less charitable, I would say, it was empowered. And you see that as early as in 1978. You see there was a November of 1978, there was a communique from William Sullivan, who was the American ambassador to Iran at the time, basically painting a ridiculously, in retrospect, rosy picture of a post-Shah Iran. The Shah, of course, being a longtime friend and ally of the United States and Western countries and Europe in general, and really a progressive for his time, modernized Iran, brought equal rights for women to Iran, and basically brought modern Western legal standards to Iran. The Iranian Constitution of 1906 established the limited authority of the Shah and the parliament, which is the Majlis. And basically, for those who don't know, I'm half Persian. I grew up with a father whose family is all Persian. And so, was my father was born in Iran. So I grew up basically hearing the stories of Iran from my childhood, but have never been there because they don't acknowledge, the Islamic Republic does not acknowledge um, my American citizenship, even though I was born in the United States. They would say, "Oh, well, where's your father born? Okay, he was born here. Well, that means you're Iranian as far as we're concerned, and now you owe us 2 years of military service," which I had no interest in performing. So, never been there, never visited, was not able to do so. Looking forward to hopefully doing it in the next few years, or hopefully with my dad, because it looks like finally this criminal regime is going to fall. Um, but yeah, just to get back to what people, it's so difficult because there's a lot of people I really respect. I mean, and I was listening to Brett Weinstein's take on this, and it's so like hopelessly wrong and misguided. And I think that guided, I think, by a really healthy impulse, which is like, hey, let's not intervene in other countries' internal politics. Um, and I get that, and I agree with that. But the fact of the matter is that that regime only exists in Iran, not because the people ever voted it in, because they didn't. It was never a choice of what kind of government do you want. It was like, you want this government, right? um, at the point of a gun. And so the Iranian people have never had a true, free, and fair election to decide the fate of their country. And what I can tell you is that there's so many mistakes that the Western media make when they're describing the history of Iran. They claim, for example, that in 1953, the CIA initiated a coup against the democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh. Mohammad Mossadegh was never elected. He was appointed at the advice of, frankly, advisors who were being uh, affected by the Soviets at the time, because Mossadegh was a member of a party that was sympathetic to the Soviet Union and wanted to end the relationship that Iran had historically had with the United Kingdom and the United States. So basically, these people advised the Shah to appoint, because in the Constitution of 1906, the Shah appoints the prime minister, and the Majlis, the parliament, has some ability to um, basically impeach members of the cabinet if they don't like them, or if they're incompetent, or they're not doing their job. But it was a true division of power between the legislature and the Shah and the prime minister and their government, and that was the way that the Constitution was designed. Um, so what you saw was Mossadegh trying to make a play for power and basically get rid of the balancing accountability that the Shah provided, which is really, that's the role that the monarch since 1906 was supposed to play, and did play in Iran until 1979, which is really bringing accountability and holding the elected leaders accountable through the mechanisms of state that existed. Um, and yeah, I mean, unfortunately, what ended up happening was that Mossadegh tried to make a play for power and get rid of the Shah. And as a result, he had to flee the country. And then, with the help of the United States, the United Kingdom was able to deal with the Soviet elements that were trying to take over the country. And they were able to return the Shah to power. But people say that, the United States installed the Shah in 1953. That's not what happened. The Shah had been the leader of the country since his father was forced to abdicate by the United States and United Kingdom, because he was wanting to maintain the Iranian territorial sovereignty and not allow anybody, either the Axis or the Allies, access to Iranian um, railways. And the Allies felt this is unacceptable. We have to use Iran's railways, and we have to basically use them as a corridor to move troops and supplies. So they basically came in and then at a gunpoint said to Shah's father, Reza Shah, you have to leave, or we're going to kill you, basically. And so these were his, our government and the government of the United Kingdom did that. And so then, of course, when he was forced into exile in South Africa, his son, Mohammad Reza Shah, became Shah from that time in, I think it was 1943 or 44, until 1979, during the Islamic Revolution, where rather than initiate a crackdown, rather than do the kind of mass murder that the current regime is doing, he said, look, if you no longer want me to be your Shah, I will leave. And so he did, and put in a member of the opposition as prime minister and called for elections. But before that could happen, that prime minister, Bakhtari, um, allowed Khomeini to come back into the country. Khomeini had been exiled for basically treason. Rather than killing him, they gave him the more, I guess, humane punishment of exile. But then Bakhtari, who was frankly a pretty weak prime minister, allowed Khomeini to come back in, and then that really catalyzed the forces of that paramilitary coup, which led to the formation of this Islamic regime, which is ruled by the clerics, ruled by the Muslim mullahs and the ayatollahs. And so we've had that since in Iran, and it's been a horribly brutal, repressive regime. But there are a few reasons why the US and UK and France at the time allowed that to happen. One, the deal that they'd had with the Shah regarding the oil contract was up in 1979. So they were wanting to renegotiate with someone that they thought would be less intelligent and less tough negotiator. So the Shah was a Western educated, he was educated in Europe and spoke perfect English and French and other languages as well. And they just thought, hey, Khomeini, what does he know? He's a cleric. He's probably going to let somebody else make all these decisions for him. He's going to be a figurehead, right? Little did they know he planned on being ruled by despotism, basically, in a way that, they called the Shah a despot, but in reality, the Shah was a constitutional monarch. Instead, what they got was an actual despot who was very anti-West, very anti-Israel, very anti-American, loved to chant death to America. And, we got the Iranian hostage crisis as a result, and the rest is history. But I would just say that really what I think we have an opportunity now with this president and this time in American history to correct this great wrong that we committed on the Iranian people, basically in order to get cheaper oil, right? And you see that there was, they said, oh well, we think Khomeini can kind of keep the Soviet influence in check, which at the time was still a little bit of an issue. We think he's going to give us lower oil prices, which turned out to be completely false. He gave lower oil prices to China, so that was true, I guess. Um, and then they also felt that basically that, and this part I think they did achieve, was that Iran at the time was on its way to becoming the fifth largest economy in the world. It was, definitely going to be the top regional power and frankly one of the global powers if Shah had stayed in charge. And I think that was threatening to, frankly, the West. And they felt a weaker Iran will be a more biddable Iran and easier to manage Iran, and will have access to all that oil. What they didn't realize is that the best friend that they had in the Shah, that yes, he was not willing to let the oil go for free, but ultimately, geopolitically, militarily, the Shah was a fast friend and ally to the West. Whereas this Islamic Republic, of course, has become the number one state sponsor of terrorism in the world stage, and has funded and supported Hamas, Hezbollah, etc. I know I've been talking for a while here, but this is a subject which, of course, is very near and dear to my heart, and that I have a lot of, cousins still in Iran who are risking their lives on a daily basis to try to help bring down this regime. And, to them, I would just say, the Lord be with you, and my thoughts and prayers are with you. And I greatly hope that you all stay safe, but also do everything you can to help undermine this horrible regime. And help is on the way. And thanks be to God and President Trump. I never thought I'd say those words, but I think that this is going to be a great thing for not just Iran and the United States, but the world, and the safety and stability of the world, to get rid of this criminal regime. And I'd be more than happy to have a conversation about it with Brett or anyone else who feels that whose general bias is, hey, let's not intervene. Let's let other people work out their problems. Because when you have a country where there is no Second Amendment, there is no right to bear arms, all of the guns are in the hands of the military, you're basically relying upon the military, who is currently all of the money and resources are going to the military to help maintain the power of these mullahs. Basically, it's, all of the money and the assets and the wealth of the country gets shunted to the mullahs and to the military. And as a result, you have a populace that's being starved to death, but you have the people with the guns and the power perfectly happy and living out their best lives while the rest of the people starve. And, we as a society, if we truly believe in freedom and we truly believe in democracy, owe it to ourselves and to the world to really get behind that idea and support, and when people are getting massacred in the streets due to a regime that frankly we empowered and have continued to empower through trade and, in the Obama administration unfreezing their assets and any number of other things, the more we negotiate with them, the more we give them legitimacy. And it's time for that to end. And fortunately, I mean, the latest news is that the European Union has declared the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, which is really the private military force of the clerics, the Islamic clerics, has finally declared that organization a terrorist organization, which we in the United States have done some time ago. And I think that basically we're now just waiting on the United Kingdom to do that. We now have several assets in the Middle East getting ready to both, I think, go after the IRGC as well as the leadership of the country, as well as to protect Israel, our number one non-NATO ally, when that does happen, because the IRGC has promised to throw everything it has at Tel Aviv the moment there's any kind of attack that begins. So yeah, I think at this point it's just a waiting game. But fortunately, we have other allies. We have the United Kingdom is involved now. We have Jordan, the UAE, Azerbaijan. All of these have formed a new modern day coalition of the willing, if you will, pardon the pun, to support this effort and to help protect Israel from whatever attack may be coming with the drones and the missiles that the IRGC may throw at Israel during its last gasp of existence. But at this point, I think it's pretty clear to everyone involved that this regime has lost all legitimacy and all capability and capacity to run the country. You have massive hyperinflation, you have water crisis, amongst other things. The water crisis, incidentally, was caused by. Have you heard about the water crisis? Have we talked about the water crisis? Yeah, but it's basically was caused by the fact that they didn't do any environmental studies on anything. They've just done massive development, and they're using water, which is necessary for these different developments, just like it was going out of style. And basically now they don't have any water left because historically they've had a very delicate system of what are called qanats, which are like kind of these underground canals that were protected from the sun and allowed for irrigation and water supply to come through. And now they've not only basically stolen all the water from those qanats, but not done anything to replace them. And so as a result, now there's no water. So this regime has been totally interested in self-aggrandizement and self-enrichment and not in the long-term best interests of the country, which, one of the things that the people are chanting in the streets right now is without a Shah, without the king, which really has provided that stabilizing force in Iranian society for 2,500 years, there's no accountability. The government is not accountable to either, because it's not accountable to the people, because there's no one making sure that they actually adhere to democratic principles. So, it may seem strange to people, especially here in the West, that you have people chanting for the return of the king. It feels like something out of, Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, right? But that's literally what's happening right now, because people see that without their king, there's no accountability. And, I think that there's a whole nother conversation to be made about sort of the pros and cons. We in this country have a very strong bias in favor of a republic, against monarchy, because of our own history. But if you look at it from a more unbiased sort of political science perspective, there are definitely benefits to constitutional monarchy. And, I think that's maybe a conversation we can have at a later date. But not that I'm advocating that for this country, but I think in countries where you have a 2,500-year-old history, there is a benefit to not throwing out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak, when it comes to the stability that the monarchy can provide, especially when you have a country that's a coalition of many different racial groups, which Iran is. The Persians, people say, oh, Iran and Persia, same thing. No, the Persians are the number one ethnicity in Iran, but they are not, in fact, the only ethnicity. There's many other ethnic groups. There's Azeris, there's Kurds, and there's many others whose names escape me right now. But yeah.
I don't get
Yeah.
how Brett doesn't see that it's not in our best interest to get involved long term.
I think he's just coming from a general, like, sort of a reactive, like, Iraq was bad, this is going to be bad too, right? Because Iraq had a lot of it's the principle of unintended consequences, right? You may come in having the best of intentions, thinking like this is going to be great, we're going to liberate the people, but then there's going to be downstream effects of it that you can't anticipate, despite your best efforts, and those unintended consequences are very likely to be worse than whatever benefits you're hoping to achieve. And it's a reasonable argument. I think the problem is twofold. It doesn't get much worse than the Islamic Republic, number one. Like, this is truly like the worst of the worst in terms of regimes in this
So
on this
let
planet.
me get a little bit on the court, okay, with like the worst of the worst that's happening.
Sure.
So my sources are telling me that within a 48-hour period, 30,000 people were killed. And now the number is up to 43,000. Their bodies piled up in semi trucks. They're having a hard time dealing with that. And I thought that I wasn't going to. I've been just kind of standing. I've been listening, looking and listening, right? But now I'm ready to like beg the question to our audience and to our friends and family, and I'm having an adjacent conversation, okay?
Sure.
Like how might we be legitimizing terrorism?
You say we as in people
As
that
in
are
people.
saying not to attack.
Not to attack, and also um, not responding in the same way. Uh, like there are so many people posting, so many people posting on what's happening in Palestine,
Hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yet those same people are not, their voices are kind of they're mute, when it comes to this massacre, where it's like a clear massacre, right?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the problems, and this goes back to France 1978, is that it was left-wing politicians who sort of said, we are going to become friendly with the Islamic Republic and the Islamists. And it was kind of an unholy alliance. And you saw that even in the Iranian Revolution, where you had the unholy alliance between the red and the black. Now they call themselves green because Islam is green. It used to be black because of the black robes that they would wear, right? But regardless whether you're going to call the Islamists black or green, it's like a unholy alliance between the red, the communists, the Soviets at the time, and the Islamists, right? And that has really continued in France, in other countries as well. You see that most of the Islamic immigration that's happened from the Middle East to Europe has happened under more left-leaning governments, and even to this day in the United Kingdom, that's the case. And I think it's interesting. I think that there's also this sort of what they call Islamophobia. I would say more of like Islamoscepticism is maybe a term I think is more accurate. Um, there's this push and pull between the Islamo-skeptics and the people who are saying, oh, you're being Islamophobic by being skeptical of Islam. And that also is part of the political immigration, what they call, um, what do they call the immigrants that are, they say refugees, right? This a refugee is you're coming from a country that's politically unstable. But the question I always have is, well, are those people actually wanting to be in your country, or are they just not wanting to get killed in their own country, right? And I think that a lot of times they come to these Western European countries, and to a lesser degree our country, and they say, oh, I really just want the same kind of society I had back in my home country, but I want it to be peaceful. It's without taking any kind of responsibility for what are the ways in which we were living and values and beliefs we were upholding that led to the country being as unstable as it was when we had to leave. So, you follow me?
I do.
Did I address what you were saying at all, or did I kind of go in a different direction?
Both.
Okay, great.
So let me get back to
Mission accomplished.
what I'm saying. I am now ready to say that October 7th was just a tiny little glimpse of what is to come and what's already happening. I think that well, the question is, how do you hold jihadists accountable, right? How do you, like, if you're spending time giving nuance on what terrorism is, I mean, it will beget more terrorism. Terrorism is terrorism is terrorism, terrorism.
Yeah, I think realistically, when it comes to jihadism, you have a few choices, not very many. You can either, the challenge is if you kill them, then oftentimes that then radicalizes their children and their relatives, right? So that's a problem, right? I think that the second option is,
I mean,
well, hold on,
they
let me
are
finish
already
this.
radicalized.
Well,
I mean, these babies are being.
maybe. Yes, I see what you're saying. Yes, they're already getting radicalized because they're being taught from an early age to hate Jewish people, hate the West.
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally agree. And we can, if people are interested, we can show examples of that. There's videos out there you can watch where literally the children are talking about how they can't wait to be martyrs like their older brother, etc. Right? It is horrifying.
They're not just talking about, they're talking about, being excited about blowing, they're actually
blowing up Jewish people.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're actually saying that.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's like literal from their mouths, right? It's not just like what somebody said on the news or
I
whatever.
mean, how do you deal with a culture that
Right.
grooms?
So this is perfect, right? Because I said there's three ways you deal with it, right? One was to kill them, but the problem is that then you radicalize, you can't kill everybody. You can't just wipe them
Well,
off.
you can just say that that's been history repeating itself. So what's a real solution?
Right. So the real solution is the other two options would be one, number two would be to, lock them up and throw away the key, and then hope that by removing the negative influence, you allow the kids and the wives and everybody to maybe say, hey, we don't want to get locked up the rest of our lives. We're going to try to do better. But we don't have as much hatred because you didn't kill our father or our brother or our husband, but you just, he's being punished, right, for his malfeasance. That probably is the most workable solution, actually, if we have the space for it and the willingness. The third option, which is my personal favorite, but it probably is the most controversial because the question is how to do it in a way that doesn't violate any kind of international laws or conventions or that kind of thing. But it's basically you take people and you essentially reform them, right? It's like, what is prison supposed to be? It's supposed to be a place to go to actually get reformed, rehabilitated, right? So my idea, if I were made chief of this program, how would I deal with, say, Hamas and the Palestinians who are radicalized? And frankly, this terrorists anywhere in the world, it's take them, put them into programs where they can get reformed and rehabilitated. And then ultimately, when they, sort of were convinced that they are no longer a threat to society, they can, and they've done their time for their crimes, then they can be reintroduced, and that may mean, by the way, also providing those kinds of facilities for rehabilitation and reform for their children, because the children may have gone to schools where they were taught to hate other people. And so they may need to be put in schools, for example, where they're taught to love other people, right? I mean, to me, that seems pretty straightforward. And it's like, nobody has to die, and you actually do work towards fixing the problem. And some people may never be rehabilitated sufficiently to be able to be released, but I think the majority of people probably could be, given enough time and attention. But again, that's going to take resources. It's going to take people who, it's going to take those people who are currently protesting out on the street saying, oh, free Palestine, right? It's going to take those people actually giving a what about the actual real life, Palestinian people, and devoting the rest of their lives to helping to rehabilitate and reform those people.
Sorry, that just seems a little bit so pie in the sky.
It is a bit
exactly.
No, it is a bit
the resources that it would take.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Right now, those resources are going to corrupt Palestinian Authority leaders, people like Mahmoud Abbas, who is then squandering them on his own, I don't know, gold toilets or whatever. That's Saddam Hussein, but you get my point, right? It's like his own children, and they're all multi-billionaires now. And it's like, well, how did that happen? Well, it's called embezzlement, right? So the point is, you have to basically, the only way you actually get that money to a place where it can do some good is if you have a system by which that money goes through these, whether it be NGOs or whether it be through some sort of Israeli government ministry that they create that's for reform and rehabilitation, and actually put that money in a place where that provides for high quality public schooling for the Palestinian children, high quality reform and rehabilitation programs for what do you call it when you give you educate people newly to give them new skills, like skills development for people who don't have job skills, right? And you gotta, instead of just giving them money and saying, here, allocate this however you want, there needs to be either, whether it be an international organization or an Israeli organization, for the rehabilitation and reform of these people who have been living in very desperate situation for the last, few generations, frankly. But it's never going to happen. There's never going to be, and to me, the opportunity, and you and I have talked about this on one-on-one. I, for many years, 15, 20 years, have advocated for what I call the one state, two government solution for Israel-Palestine. And what that looks like is one state, Israel, two different governments. You have a Jewish government and a Muslim government. And regardless of where you live in that land area called Israel, you can choose to be governed by, the Jewish government, which is basically democratic, Western, or the Muslim government, which is going to be more Palestinian in alignment. But the idea is that they could share certain resources like emergency medical care and stuff like that. But for the most part, in terms of like judicial system or like, I want to be taken care of by someone. If let's say I'm Muslim, I want to be taken care of by somebody who's Muslim. I'm going to pay my taxes to the Muslim entity, and then we have central organization deal with, like, say, first responders. We both pay into that, right? I think there's a way to do it, and I forget, there's a technical term for this kind of a system, but it's basically one state, two governments, and the government is like, you get to pick which government you want to be under, and your vote goes toward that government, and you get to decide who's your leaders. But then there's pooled resources for certain things that make sense on a more geographic basis. And then for certain things that don't have to be purely geographic, you have the different governments. And then that way, all of these other deals, these other conflicts that we have about, oh, should it, be this state or that state, we just have one state and two governments, and the governments work together to take care of the people that live within that one unified state. That's how I would handle that problem. And I do think that part of that has to be reform and rehabilitation. And I get it's probably not going to happen in our lifetime, but it could. Hey, I put the idea out there. Now, policymakers, feel free to run with it, right?
I'm kind of moved right now because so here I'm thinking it's all pie in the sky as you're, but I know that you have given birth to some ideas and have had them like come to fruition like in real life. So it really does start with words, right? It really does start with a conversation.
Yep.
Yeah, so I got that. Um, and also I really wanted to address I think we have a mass moral confusion about what terrorism is. I think people in the US are divided. Um, and if, it were like a clear line, like I think everybody would be behind, okay, let's stamp it out. Like no matter where you are in the world, like that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
So I think the moral confusion is what is very divisive.
Well, I think the moral confusion idea, and I shared this story with you. Law school, I was in law school during 9/11 when that happened. And it was the day after 9/11. I was sitting in civil procedure and we were just talking about 9/11. I mean, there was no civil procedure going on there. And I raised my hand and I said, what do you think about, to the professor, what do you think about the possibility that our intervention in foreign states, especially these Arabic states and, the Iran and, different countries in the region have led to the kind of animosity which animated the hijackers on 9/11. Oh my gosh, you cannot imagine the uproar that caused. I think like half the hands went up in the room, and I basically got shot down so hard because people were not really ready and willing and able to listen to that concept the day after. It's too soon, right? Fair enough. I totally get it. It was too soon. But I was already my point is I was already thinking like, what could explain this? Why would they do this, right? I was trying to get in the minds of these nuttos to try to figure out why they would do what they did. And I think that what's interesting is that now we have taken that impulse to try to understand the enemy, and we have now taken it to the other extreme, right? Not like, oh, let's try to figure it out so that we can help prevent it. It's now like, let's empathize with them so that basically we empathize with, and you saw this, it came out, there was a Bin Laden letter that people were saying, oh, I agree with like half the stuff he said in this letter, right? It's like people have gone from trying to understand the mindset in order to prevent future catastrophes to empathizing with, to the point of agreeing with people like the 9/11 terrorists, right? And that's what you see with October 7. It's just an extension of that same through line of like, we want to try to understand, okay, great, but out of understanding needs to come maybe a little bit of correction, but also like a hardening of where we're right. And that's the thing. It's like there's this tendency to be like, oh, America is just wrong, right? Which is bullshit, pardon my French. But like, we are mostly right, but make occasional mistakes, right? 1979 Iran was one of those mistakes, right? We should have had the Shahs back 110%, right? Instead, we didn't. And so now we've been paying for it for 47 years in every part of the Middle East and probably beyond that. But now we have an opportunity to correct that mistake, number one. And number two, we have to draw the line between saying, look, we understand why you did this terrorist activity, but no amount of why you did it justifies the fact that you did it, right? It's like it was the wrong thing to do, whether it's 9/11 or October 7th, it was wrong. Shouldn't have done it, right? And no amount of justification, sorry, no amount of excuses is the correct legal term. No amount of excuses makes it okay that you did those things, that you did those, you created that terror in the lives of those people and killed people and apparently you're not supposed to say the word on YouTube. Do you want to pause real quick? Or
The direction I really want to go is to address the divisiveness among people of the US, really, and address that, moral confusion about what's going on, about like this clear gaping, you know, what's happening in Iran right now.
well, I think that it's not unrelated to what we're talking about with regard to Israel-Palestine. And I think that the challenge is, what's that? So I think that the fundamental tension right now we're seeing is in this whole, it's a kind of a confusion between what I like to call the America First crowd and the America Only crowd. And they both call themselves America First, so it's really confusing, right? But like America First, as I would distinguish it, is like,
Are these coined phrases or is this yours?
well, I'm creating a new distinction.
Okay.
The coined phrase, the Civil War, if you will, or it's not, I don't like to use the term Civil War here, but I would say the conflict is between people who are America First and they all call themselves America First. But what does it mean to be America First when it comes to foreign policy? And I would say that the fundamental division that I see, and this is a distinction I'm creating, is between America First and America Only. So America Only is like, hey, you know what? We shouldn't be sending money overseas. We shouldn't be getting involved in any kind of foreign wars or foreign conflicts. We should be isolationist. We should focus on America. We should put a giant gold dome over the United States and say F off to the rest of the world. We're going to do our own thing, right? And the America First crowd is more of a traditional kind of, we are going to maintain the American empire by making sure that America's needs are taken care of first and foremost. And we're going to help our allies in order to further that, because if we don't have allies, we're not going to be able to maintain our empire. And in order to keep cheap prices and goods flowing and all the nice standard of living things we're used to as Americans, we need to have those foreign trade deals. We need to have, relationships with other countries. We need to have allies. We need to maintain our relationship with Europe. We need to maintain our relationship with Taiwan. We need to maintain our relationship with Israel. And we need to use our leverage militarily and politically to make sure that the trade and the sort of world order maintains itself so that America stays on top. So it's the difference between America First, or America on top would be another way to think about it, and America First, the America Only crowd, which is like more isolationist, more gold dome, more, piss off to the rest of the world. The problem is, if you do that strategy, that the problem I see with it is you're going to end up pissing off the rest of the world, because you're not helping to provide them with military assets to protect their own people. And you see that in the case of Israel, for example. People say, oh, we give so much money to Israel. No, we don't give Israel a blank check. We give Israel a voucher that says you may use this voucher at Lockheed Martin, Boeing, et cetera, the military, the big military suppliers that make the weapons and arms that we produce here in the United States. You may use this voucher to buy some of our military hardware that we produce. So the interesting thing about that is, we're really subsidizing those industries, that military industrial complex, through that voucher we're giving Israel and our other allies. And that's same is true of Ukraine, same is true of any of our allies. And so the challenge people see is like, really, that's actually like a subsidy of the military industrial complex more than it is foreign aid. Yeah, it's foreign aid in the sense that we're helping our allies, we're helping them arm themselves, protect themselves against their enemies, which then further extends that American empire and that sort of penumbra of safety that we get to offer our allies, which again helps us stay on top, right? America First. So I think people often misunderstand what America First in practice actually looks like. Because if you withdraw from those engagements, you stop giving those vouchers to our allies. You say you guys have to afford your own weapons. Well, guess what? Russian weapons are a heck of a lot cheaper. Yeah, they have to pay if they have to buy their own weapons. They're not going to be buying them from us. You know, and people don't realize that that's going to hurt our economy in the end. So the whole global system is designed to actually keep America on top. And if you're not willing to support that system, and that's part of our taxes go toward keeping the prices at Walmart low. That's what you don't realize. That's what most people don't realize. They think, oh, why are we giving money to Israel? Why are we giving money to Palestine? Why are we giving money to all these different other countries, Ukraine and, South Korea and whatever, And it's like, well, yeah, we're doing that so that we can stay on top because that's how we do it. And, I think there's a big gaping misunderstanding in how the whole world order actually works amongst a lot of people saying, oh, America first means America only and F you to everybody else. That is a huge error strategically. Big mistake.
Agree.
Yeah. So, yeah. But I think ultimately that's where we get back to Iran, right? Because that was your question.
Yeah.
Is how do we find this disconnect? Because I think the America only people are like, oh, well, why are we getting involved in Iran? This is another foreign involvement. We don't want that. Stay away. Bad idea. Like that's just it's gonna embroil us. We're gonna have another entanglement. It's just gonna be like Iraq and Afghanistan, and it's just gonna be another big headache and another big boondoggle. And it's like, yeah, I agree that American power has absolutely been overused at some point. I personally feel like Afghanistan was not one of those cases. If anything, I feel like we withdrew from Afghanistan too quickly, too early, and too completely. And I think you see that by the fact that the Taliban is back in charge, that horrible regime. I think that's absurd that we allowed that to happen after so many American lives and so many billions of American tax dollars got spent liberating that country. The fact that we allowed that to fall back to the Taliban is absurd. But, we can thank old Uncle Joe Biden for that one. So, what do you want? But one of the great achievements of the Biden administration, the Afghanistan withdrawal. Look, I mean, the fact of the matter is we need, and I've been saying this for 15 years, we need a Marshall Plan for the Middle East. We need to go in there, we need to clean out all these extremists, and we need to invest heavily. And that's going to make us a lot of money too, by the way. We need to, just like when Europe rose back up after World War II, rising tide lifts all boats, right? And we saw that. So we need a Marshall Plan. We need a Marshall Plan for the Middle East. We need to go in there. We need to invest and we need to lift those countries up and create a region of allies which can help us contain the expansion of China, which is really the country that I see as being our only real threat that we have to look out for in the long run. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One of my specialties in undergrad was Chinese thought and culture and history. So we could have a whole separate conversation, which I'm sure you would have contributions to on China and historically why they are not comfortable unless they're on top. But we will maybe put that off to a later date. If people are interested, you can ask. China conversation. But I just want to acknowledge us real quick before we continue. And we've been talking about getting into politics, and that is one of the three main topics that this show gets into. And I'm happy that we have done so on this episode.
You mean you're happy that that I'm sitting beside you and doing it?
Well, yeah, you
Finally,
really threw your
after
cards
all my resistance.
Yeah. Well, and I get it. Some of these topics are definitely confronting to a lot of people. And, it is a confronting thing to kind of throw your own hat over the wall and say, this is what I think about this.
Yeah.
But I think we've done a pretty good job of kind of laying out why we think what we think.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you say? I mean,
yes,
I hope so.
From a foundation of basic goodness
Yeah.
and truth.
Yeah, absolutely. Bingo. So I think, but if anybody's like, yeah, please email us, the Partovi effect at gmail.com. It does have a the, right? It's not just Partovi effect at gmail.com.
Correct.
Okay, just check it. The Partovi effect at gmail.com. Did you want to get into that question or save it for next episode?
Save it.
We'll save it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. Well, then I think, anything else on this topic?
No.
All right. Well, I am Dr. Ryan Partovi.
And I am Mrs. Maddie Partovi. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Partovi Effect.
Be well.